Let's talk about a lighter subject matter here with
Yeah,
the
much
old
lighter.
black phone. Let's talk about the old black
The
phone.
old black that would work 'cause it
The
is an
old
old
black
phone.
phone, yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Old Brother Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith.
You'd be missing it, Dan. There's a chill in the air.
Is there already a chill in the
Not
air?
even kidding.
Yeah, see, I
Went
like
from like
that.
90 to 60. It was like crazy.
Yeah, you're getting that autumn's moving in.
Yeah,
I'll be up there soon enough,
Yeah.
checking it out. So there's no chill down here in the old
I
South.
wouldn't think so, yeah.
No,
Not
no
till,
chill.
what, December now.
Yeah, I had a suit on today for
Yikes.
something I had to go to, and brutal. It's
Yeah.
just instant, and I had the full like tie and everything, and just instant sweat. Like, why did I even bother?
Yeah.
It's gross. But yeah, well, that speaks to the fact that it is, of course, Halloween
Halloween
Fest
fest rolling
Hell-
on.
rolling on. Yeah, that phrase is going to get tired over the next few weeks. Probably already is. People wish we would retire it, but yeah, Halloween Fest here in the old brother podcast. I think I said old brother. The old, the old brother podcast.
Hey, speak for yourself.
Maybe that would have done better for the channel. Is the old brother? A couple of like
Yeah.
miners from the whatever 1800s. But yeah, in this episode, we're going to talk about the black phone,
Mhm.
which we sort of both talked about this, but I feel like was this your idea ultimately? I can't remember.
I think I said to you, let's do old phone because
Old phone.
What
Let's
did I
do
say?
old phone.
See, you
We
got
gotta
me.
It's a whole whole
You
bit going now.
you got my brain twisted.
Let's do the old
I said, let's
phone
do
there.
black phone because
Right.
there's a bankable star, Ethan Hawke in it from Training Day and the Before trilogy, and he's just an awesome actor. Denzel won Best Actor for Training Day, and I
Yeah.
think he should have, broke off a chunk and gave it to Ethan Hawke because he was really good.
But Denzel was magic in that film.
He was, and I
He was
forget who
King
he
Kong up in that, you know what?
right. He was up against somebody like Tom Hanks or something, and he was really kind of the odd man out.
Yeah.
And I didn't think they would give it to him because it was such a violent,
Mhm.
drug-infested movie, but it was
Right.
such a great performance,
Yeah. Well, let's talk about a lighter subject matter here with
Yeah,
the
much
old
lighter.
black phone. Let's talk about the old black
The
phone.
old black that would work because it
The
is an
old
old
black
phone.
phone, yeah. And we had an old black phone, I mean,
Yeah.
we'll get into that, but rotary phones for the kids out there.
For the youngsters.
What is a rotary phone?
Yeah.
Well, even the cast of this had never seen a device such as that before filming this movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we'll talk about that. But so black phone now is listed. If you look it up on IMDb, it says 2021, but it came out in June. It was June 24th, 2022.
Mhm.
It was directed by Scott Derrickson. Now, Scott Derrickson and Ethan Hawke had worked together before. Had you seen the film Sinister that had come out in 2012?
No.
It was another thriller horror type film. So you're talking over 10 years ago, they had worked together, and it's part of what went into the decision for Ethan to choose to do the role because he had worked with Scott before,
Mhm.
but he was a lot younger at this point. So yeah, he gets a little bit more under his belt, a little bit
Yeah,
more
that was his
experience.
Gattaca days, right? Back then.
Would that have been 2012
I
era?
think around there, yeah.
Yeah. Now it's based on a short story written by Joe Hill. Now, do you know who Joe Hill is?
No.
So if you look up his full name, Joseph Hillstrom King, that ring a bell at all? The lineage? We're talking about Halloween Fest.
Right.
We just talked about the name King. So, American writer born in Herman, Maine. Getting warmer? He's the
Sounds
son of
like he's a
writer
Stephen King disciple.
son of writer Stephen King and Tabitha King.
Okay.
Yeah,
There we
so
go.
there's a really good tie into Halloween Fest right there.
So Stephen King's name is actually Kingston?
No. Joe Hill is actually Joseph Hillstrom King, but he goes by
Oh,
Joe
okay.
goes by Joe Hill. And
right.
I wonder if that has to do any with
Probably, like
getting away from the King name, try to stand on your own.
right, because even
I don't
Stephen
know.
King tried to get out of his own name by writing books.
Well, also just in Hollywood, the thing with the names, it's a whole,
Yeah.
that's a whole night a rabbit hole we could go down. Now, it's definitely a rated R film.
Mhm.
Of course, we talked about Ethan Hawke, Mason Thames, Madeleine McGraw, and Jeremy Davies. That's kind of your main cast in this film. You want to set up what this film is about? I think I'll defer to you to talk about the subject
Yeah.
matter.
Well, basically, there's a guy in the neighborhood called the Grabber. That's what they've nicknamed him in the news or whatever.
Why they call him the grabber.
To grab him, and what he does is basically he's grabbing kids from the neighborhood or disappearing,
Right.
and the police aren't really clever enough to figure it out, even though they're all from the same neighborhood, and
I'm
his house is dead
getting a whiff
center.
getting a whiff of Mike's take here in the film early
Yeah.
on. Mike's
Yeah,
take, that's what we're gonna call it.
exactly. So anyways, he grabs one of the neighborhood kids.
Mm.
He's left in a room with nothing but, like, a mattress and this old black phone. I and he keeps getting calls from victims.
You had said, on a previous episode of the show during Halloween Fest, you were talking about what was uh, you said, "Yeah, if you really wanna, like, endear the audience to a character, let's, center their crimes around rape or and stuff like that,"
Right.
right? And then child crimes right up there,
Right up there, number 2.
right up there. It's they're neck and neck, folks, but yeah, so and I think that's part of it too, just knowing the setup for the film.
Right.
Creates a sense of, terror in and of itself,
Right,
without
right.
even seeing it yet, just reading about it, but yeah,
And
so he
the
grabs this
main
kid,
right, and the
which is
main
Mason Sim
boy,
yeah,
who's the one we see in the room with the
Finney.
phone.
He goes by Finney is
Finney,
his
yeah.
name,
He
yeah.
has a sister that has some kind of
Psychic
ESP.
powers, clairvoyance,
Correct. They don't really
something,
lay it out too
and
clearly.
and her mother okay, so let's not get too down in the weeds, but,
Right.
so you're setting it up to say there's this guy in the neighborhood who
Mhm.
called the grabber, and he's,
Snatching
snatching up
kids.
kids and
Yeah.
killing these kids.
Yeah.
So he gets a hold of Finney, and he's got this dungeon basically for a basement in his home. And as you said, that's where he dumps him. It's just nothing but a mattress and the old black phone on the wall.
Right.
And you mentioned that he is able to, as the movie moves on, he's able to communicate to the previous victims through the phone. And as the film goes along, they start providing him with clues as
Right.
to how to get out of
Right, like, you'll
the
find a
house.
rope here, you'll find a spot here where I tried to dig,
Right. And I
etcetera.
thought it was well done, all of that, but I just you gotta be prepared to sort of, give up a bit of reality here, because as you're also talking about his sister,
Mhm.
played by Madeleine McGraw, who was just absolutely spectacular in this film. Just what a
Mhm.
performance this young actor gave.
And the same with Finney.
Same thing.
Great
Incredible.
young
Yeah.
performances.
Yeah, and she had a little bit, more street cred. She voiced a character, I think Bonnie in Toy Story 4, and she's done some
Mm.
things on the Disney
Oh,
Channel.
wow.
This was, I think, his first major film, I believe, but
Mhm.
just really, really good performances. And the dad, played by Jeremy Davies, who, is blue collar guy, works at the nuclear plant. It's like a Homer Simpson type,
Yeah,
and but he's also an alcoholic and he's abusive himself.
correct.
As I was starting to wonder, like, not sure, like, basement, home with dad, like, it was, again, a
I
toss up.
know.
I mean, this
I know, they
guy,
made him a pretty evil character,
he was
and then we're
pretty evil.
supposed to forgive him at the end,
Right, right,
you
making him a
know?
sympathetic character.
Right.
Now you're talking about, let's kinda get back to the point you were talking about with the sister who's got these, like you said, abilities. She has these dreams, she keeps referring to them as,
Mhm.
and she sees what? The future? The past?
Well,
Both?
she
I
can
mean,
tell, like, when they're hoping a kid comes back, she'll say, "Well, he's not coming back." Almost like she knows he's was killed.
Mhm.
And the police keep wanting to talk to her because she provides details.
Mhm.
And the father does not like that at all.
He doesn't like it, and apparently, as you learn, part of the reason why is because the mom, his wife,
Yes.
who is deceased, she sounds like maybe had well, it sounds like we were dealing with some mental illness in her case, at least the way they set it up,
Mhm.
or perceived mental illness, right? Because it sounded like maybe she would have similar dreams or see things or whatever.
Yes.
And the dad says, your mother had these things and it eventually told her to do things, awful things, and then she
Right.
killed herself
Right.
as a result of it. So
Right. And that's a side story they
it
really
wasn't
don't
quite
get into.
yeah, it wasn't quite clear what,
Yeah.
you know, but yeah, so what I liked about it, the setup of the film, because this is set in 1978 in Denver, which is where the director Scott Derrickson is from,
Mm.
from what I gathered, and he does such a wonderful job of setting up. The first, what would you say, 20, 30 minutes, maybe somewhere
Mhm.
around there, where really painting this picture of, and we both know this, and I certainly know being a kid in the 70s,
Mhm.
um, there were so many things that like Little League Baseball,
Yeah, Finney
girls
Finney had a
shooting
mean fastball.
shooting out rockets and riding BMX bikes and like all the things that were really reminiscent of that time.
Yeah.
Derrickson did such a great job of setting that up. At least again, if you can relate to having grown up as a young adult in that, a young kid in that time, I thought it just, especially in Denver, like it felt like New England to me,
Mhm.
where we grew up. So it was very relatable, the way that he set it up. And I think it's this kind of innocence of youth, right? And so
Mhm.
it was very sort of light and, to really set up and drive home the terror
Right.
that was about to befall the town
It's like wrestling,
by the
if you
grabber.
wanna have a really good bad guy or a
A
good guy,
heel.
you gotta have a real bad guy. The
Yeah.
bad guys make the good guys even better,
What is it?
and vice
Heels and
versa.
faces, right?
Yeah,
They
faces,
still using that
heels, baby
terminology?
faces or heels turning face. The crowd starts to like a bad guy.
Yeah, you
So,
made a comment about baseball where Finney is a pitcher in little league,
yeah,
and his arm is mint.
throwing smoke.
Man, your arm is mint. You almost had me.
Yeah, one of his uh,
His
opposing
Bruce.
Bruce
Mhm.
Yamada, right, who ends up being one of the first kids that's taken
That we
and
know of,
murdered.
yes.
Yeah, but that's one of the first images you see of the grabber. He's got this black van. Of course, these characters always got some van with tinted windows.
Well,
Probably
what's
not
with
a good investment. Didn't Dad have one of those? Actually, now to come to think of it, now there's a whole side story we could get
yeah,
into.
Dad the
The
Grabber.
old black van that Dad had, but there's a shot of Bruce riding his bike down the middle of the road, which you could
Yes.
do. Some of the things you could do back then, which again I think is part of this, right? It was pretty easy to snatch a kid off the streets back in the 70s. We were running wild all over the place at
Right.
all hours of the night, after
Do you
sunset.
remember, I don't know if you're, um, old enough or young enough, whatever the case may be, when they used to have the insect trucks
Yes,
with the smoke?
you're right.
Like, heavy, heavy smoke around
Yeah.
this time of
Just a
year,
truck that would drive by the neigh and just
and
cover the neighborhood
we would
in
be running.
insect repellent.
Yeah, we would be
A
running in this smoke.
a fog, yeah.
A huge fire. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face,
No.
yet,
And
you
l
know.
we turned out okay.
Yeah. The grabber would have had us easily, Just
Exactly,
wait for
yeah.
that, just follow that truck
Heck,
and
why didn't you just drive one of those trucks around? He coulda had a whole slew of kids. But but there's a shot of Bruce riding his bike,
Yeah.
And it's very, it's a very kind of uplifting
"Hi,
scene and
Bruce. Hi,
right, and he sees
Bruce."
girls, he's
Yeah.
looking at the girls walking down the thing and whatever, and then just all of a sudden, kind of in the distance, you see the black van turn the corner and turn out onto the street, and then the scene just slowly fades to black,
Right.
and you know what the rest
And
of that
next thing you
story
know,
is.
there's signs up,
Right.
"Missing child."
Right, just some great directing there to set it up, and
Yeah.
again, that whole opening bit, just setting up the incredible horror of child crimes, quite
And I
frankly.
agree, the first 40 minutes of this movie
Mhm.
had me. I was,
Oh,
like,
yeah,
into it,
I was riveted, yeah. We actually get our first glimpse of the grabber
which
when he grabs Finney. Now, if you've read the short story, which I read some of the short story,
Mhm.
and it's a very different character. It sounded like a very obese, real heavy set character, bald head.
Which was funny because there's a scene with Ethan Hawke sitting in a chair with his
Yes.
stomach out,
Yeah.
trying to act like
S
he's
Still looked better
heavy.
than both of us put together.
Exactly,
He still was
exactly.
in better shape. Yeah, he was very it was interesting to know that that was Ethan. It was weird with the mask. This is one of the creepier ones that I've seen,
Yeah,
and that's the poster for the film too, is that
correct.
mask and the top hat. It's very creepy. So he encounters Finney walking down the street home from school, and he drops a bag of groceries or something, right? "Oh, geez," and just to try
Right.
to lure you can tell he's luring Finney in, right?
Mhm,
And ends up spraying well, he gets up and he's not have the mask, right? But he's got like white face.
mhm.
If you know, it's just very weird. They did it, and he tells him, he's got balloons in the back of the car, black
Right,
balloons.
black balloons.
Right. And he says, "Oh, I'm a part-time magician.
Right, you
You
wanna
want to
see a
see a
trick.
trick?"
Yeah,
And shaking up what we find out was like, bug spray or something to knock him out and get him into the back of the van
and he uses the balloons try to in case anybody's
to try to cover it
watching,
up.
trying
Right.
to cover it up.
And then he lets them go. Now, if you read the that whole sequence in the short story is a little bit different. It's very well written by Joe Hill, where, as I said, he paints a different description of the character. It's very, overweight, heavy set guy and whatever.
Yeah.
Similar in that he's got 2 arms of groceries. There's a lot of similarities, but the description of things like Finney commenting on the balloons, the character of Finney in the short story loves grape soda, and when, Joe Hill describes the can that the
Mhm,
grabber has, it's clearly a can of, like, wasp spray,
mhm.
and he sprays it in the kid's eyes and his mouth, and so suddenly there's descriptions like he sees the black balloons as he's being pushed into the back of the van, and he's thinking of grapes and the grape soda, and all of a
Right.
sudden his taste for grape soda has changed because of this metallic taste that he now has. It was very just really
Yeah,
well-written
just see,
description.
that's what you can do in a book.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Like all the
Nicely done.
Stephen King books, they're so much more descriptive
Right. Right.
than you can do in a movie.
So where it sounds like you got off the train here at some point with it, and where was that?
What the biggest strength I thought was gonna be, Ethan Hawke, was the biggest downfall, because as
Mm.
soon as they introduce his brother, I saw the rest of the movie play
Mhm.
out. Like,
Mhm.
nothing fooled me, not even the Silence of the Lambs deep fake fail I saw
Well,
it
what
coming.
what was it that you thought they were trying to get you,
Well, first off, we know as soon as we see Ethan Hawke that it's Ethan Hawke and he's the grabber.
Mhm.
So, the police gonna confuse his brother for him. His brother is also, like, trying to figure out the whole thing, and he's got
Yeah,
it all mapped up on his wall right to his house. Like, come
right.
on, that
This
I just didn't buy.
his brother's name was Max. I felt like that character could have completely been written out of the film.
Yes.
I didn't get deep enough into the short story to see if it's in the short story, but that was one of the biggest problems I had is this brother character that you
Yeah.
talk about. And another thing is I wish that Ethan had never taken the mask off. I thought it lost a little something when you really completely knew that it was Ethan Hawke.
Correct.
That first shot of him as I described where he's got like this clown makeup on almost because the grabber in the short story says to the kid, "Oh, I'm a part-time clown,"
Mhm.
as opposed to a magician, but that was still very creepy and, like, you kinda know it's Ethan Hawke, but it was just very sort
And
of
then it
different
comes
look.
off in phases. It's almost like
Yes.
the top piece comes off and you have just this
Yes.
set of fake teeth.
Right, and Derrickson talks about that. The director says, and I think Ethan Hawke too, how, use that as a device to sort of emphasize where, like, if he really needed to communicate, the bottom piece was off, and if he, there was justification, I guess, behind the
Right.
3 different pieces, but when it was completely off, I don't know, it lost a little something for me. I
And
wasn't as
and there
creeped
was
out.
elements in it where you're like, "Doesn't he hear that?" Like, because Finney's trying to escape.
Well, he's in a soundproofed room, Mike. He's gonna
Right.
say he sets that up where he says,
Right.
"Go ahead and scream if you want. Nobody's gonna hear you because it's
And
soundproofed,"
they even
right?
show it. They even show him
Right.
screaming with a shot from outside where it's dead silent,
That's right.
you
Which was
know?
that was really well done too. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty terrifying. And his brother, fast forward a little bit to the end, spoiler alert, but you find out that what they live in both houses, one right across from the other. Like one
Right.
was the grave for all the previous kids that he murdered,
Right.
and the other one is just where he plays all the mind
I
games
wasn't
and
even gonna
things.
go that far as far as spoilers, but yeah,
Right?
there's
I mean,
there's 2 houses
right, but
and
that's why you might be thinking when you realize his brother's involved, not involved,
right,
but his brother's in the story, you're like, "What, he's not hearing or getting wind of this?"
right, right.
Like you said, it got a little
Like
bit
when the door would open and he would yell or whatever, his brother's upstairs on the maybe he waited until the brother was at work, I don't know. Why did he keep Finney alive?
I don't
It's
that's
not
another
really
problem I had.
explained
It's
because
another
it
problem I
seems like
had.
he killed all the other kids right away, but for
Right.
some reason, he's keeping this kid alive.
Right, and what was the whole thing where, Ethan's character is saying, because he's like, "Let me go," or something. "Well, I'm thinking about letting you go."
Right,
And this whole back and forth, but then he says, uh, he has to go upstairs for a while, and it's, something he's like, "What? Is there someone here? Is it the police? Do they know?"
right.
And all of this back and forth. But what was Ethan Hawke talking about as the grabber with something's gotten complicated and I'll be back in a while, and what was going on upstairs? Was he trying
We
to help
don't
Max make dinner? I don't know
we
what
don't
the hell
know.
was
We
going
don't know, and at one point,
on.
again, another spoiler alert, Finney
Right.
escapes. He literally gets out, and he gets grabbed a second time so easily. I mean, you see the lights going on
Well, he didn't. Oh, I
in
see
the
what you mean now.
neighborhood.
Oh, when he literally was out
He
running
was
away in the
literally
neighborhood.
outside, and he's screaming, and the lights go out, and then Ethan Hawke kinda holds him until the lights, go back
Right.
out,
And
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 then
the van is sitting right there. Nobody
yeah,
notices this.
nobody's
Yeah.
gonna look out like, they're gonna turn the light out and see this van and not
I
call the
a
police.
little weak. It was a
That
little
was
weak.
that was rough,
That was a
you
little
know?
silly, yeah. Because wasn't Ethan Hawke, like, shirtless at that point, and
Yeah,
he had the mask on, like, nobody's catching this?
right, exactly.
I don't know if it was around Halloween, but that was a stretch for
Yeah,
sure.
but that's
Yeah,
it. It seemed like when the brother came in the picture, the whole thing fell apart.
it was so and he was in Sinister, I think, that same actor. So
Was
they've
he?
worked this must be one of his go-to people now.
Probably,
But
yeah.
he was way over the top with it. It was like the Sling Blade type character, just
Correct.
he's coked out of his mind, which was maybe another, you know, explaining away why he was so clueless. I don't
Well,
know.
I don't
Like,
think the way he
it wasn't
portrayed
until
him.
he killed 17 kids before he decided to go look down the basement. That's what they made it seem like, right?
Yes.
It's like, "You
Yes,
know
and then
what?
he
I am
he
gonna go down there.
right,
You
let me
can't stop me."
yeah, let me check out what's going on, and then he sees Finney.
Right. "I'm your older brother, Grabber, and I was looked over."
Fredo. I
Little
mean, he
Fredo.
was like a Fredo.
He was
You
a
didn't need
Fredo
to have him
character.
snorting cocaine because he was a dimwit, you
He
know?
was a total dimwit. Meanwhile, the sister is, she's literally cluing it together in her
Right.
dreams, you
She's
know?
on his trail.
Yeah, I let that go just because I thought her performance was so intense. Because there's a scene where she's getting beaten with a belt by the
By the
father
dad, yeah.
because he finds out she's been talking about the dream stuff at school or whatever, she
To
got in
the
trouble.
police.
Well, to the police, yeah, because they came to the school to talk to her.
Right. Right.
And, that was an intense scene where he's really kinda, grilling her and saying, "Enough with these dreams, and, your dreams are just dreams," and she's crying. It was a really good performance by this young actress. I was,
Yeah.
like, really impressed by it, but, yeah, it started to go off the rails a little bit. It felt like this would be something I could see on the stage as a three-act play. It was very much kind of filmed and performed almost like a play, right? You got really one
Mhm.
set if you think about it.
Yeah. Almost like
Um,
I would say Agatha Christie, but, you have all the people on stage to begin with, and then they start dropping.
right, right, right. And when they would go back, we talk about Gwen's dreams, Derrickson uses kind of Super 8 film, it's very kind of the old home movies like that we
Right.
grew up
Right.
with. It had that just to kind of offset like her dream state versus, what was the current day or time or what have you. It was filmed in North Carolina. It's I mean, the budget was only 18,000,000. It's done, I think, 100,000,000, over 100,000,000. It's done well.
I mean, we don't really get closure on what happens to him
No. Now, did
because
it fo
they really the police show up at the door, right? Which we don't know it. Wink, wink. It's the wrong door, and they're about to charge in, and
you
they
mean wrong
charge in
wrong house or
to
wrong
the
door?
wrong house.
Right, which the right and wrong house, right? Because 'Cause they're again, apparently they must have done pretty well for themselves. They got one house on one side of the street, another house, pretty decent ranchers, pretty nice houses.
He's not really working because he's
Well,
just sitting there all day.
he's a part-time
He's just a
magician.
part-time clown
Yes,
or
he's
yeah,
making up he's pulling he's got
side hustle
yeah, these balloons
from
don't pay for them
grounded kids.
these balloons don't pay for themselves. And what was really this just since we're goofing on it a little bit was, there's early in the film, typical coming of age film where Finney's character is, he's probably like to be a little bit more popular with the female,
Yeah. Yeah,
characters
yeah,
in the
yeah.
film, and once he he gets his ass kicked a few times in the film, but there's a scene early in the film. You talk about this character Robin, who's like the badass kid at school, but he was like the size of he was just
Yeah,
this young, little, very diminutive kid. We're introduced to him where he's squaring off with this much larger kid.
a bully.
Yeah, and he ends up just wiping the floor with
Right,
this kid out.
destroying 'em.
Now, I witnessed almost the exact same fight at school. This
You
was
didn't tell
this was very
Are you
big
the
back
one that
then.
told mom on me?
No, 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 this wasn't you, but there
Oh,
was a kid
oh,
in the neighborhood that I went to school with. Now
right,
back then, I don't know about now, I don't wanna know about now, but back then, it was very common, that one of my favorite movies, 3 O'Clock High, which is all about this kid
right,
being threatened by the bully, "At 3 o'clock, I'll meet you in the parking lot."
correct.
That used to happen every day to
Oh, yeah, that was the
some
big
kid in
thing.
school was always being threatened to get beat up in the parking lot,
Correct,
right?
correct.
Sometimes it was
I
me,
had a couple of
sometimes it
those.
was yeah, sometimes
Yeah,
you're the perpetrator, sometimes you're on the
yeah,
other side of it, but you can see that, the girls at school seem to take to that more than, Finney
right,
when he gets his ass handed to him. But at the end of the film, one of the last scenes in the film, I think, is him sitting down in
next to the
class
girl.
next to one of those girls from early in the film, and
Mhm.
now all of a sudden she's, "Hey, Finney," I'm like,
Right.
"Okay, so turns out murder gets the women." I
You
mean, is that the lesson here? It was very kinda
right.
odd
So you were a
because
victim of the grabber, huh?
Well,
Hmm.
spoiler alert, spoiler alert, he kills the grabber.
See, now, you just spoiled it for me because I forgot that.
What?
How did I forget that? I don't know.
When did you watch the film?
Last
Back in
week?
the '78s?
No, last week when we decided.
Yeah, he
Um,
he kills Ethan Hawke.
oh, I forgot that. Because
You
remember
forgot the entire
I
climax of the
said they
film.
really didn't clean it up because I remember the cops going in
Mhm.
and then it was kind of a
No,
blank.
that was a result of really him trying to get away that first time that you described.
Right,
And he brings it back in, and now it's like now it's on because he's
right.
pissed and the grabber never heard, like, his basement being demolished throughout the film. He tried to get through the wall at one point. He's
Yeah.
tearing the floor up. I mean, I guess the soundproofing was the
Yeah, but
explanation
still, it
there.
was soundproofing to the outside, not
Right.
necessarily to him. And he always would turn a light on and cough before he came in the room, like so Finney could get back into the bed.
Right. Well, he's a friendly neighborhood grabber,
Yeah, he protects the privacy of his victims.
But yeah, that was the whole, like, he was teaching him how to throw a
Yeah,
punch
yeah, I
with the
remember that
phone,
now.
right?
Yeah.
Step back, then step forward real quick, then swing,
Right,
and
right.
so that's how he ended up actually getting it. It
I
was
don't know
pretty violent,
why I forgot that, but
but I
now
wrote
it's
it down. I'm like, "Turns out murder gets the girls." It was just like a weird thing,
it the whole ending, like I said, they definitely were stealing Silence of the Lambs
Mhm.
for the ending, when the cops break in and they think they're gonna rescue the girl
The
and she's
Buffalo
really.
Bill.
Yeah. So, um, but like I said, the first 40 minutes really engaging, and then it just falls apart so bad.
Yeah, I
I
almost
couldn't really enjoy it at that point.
I think I would've it might have been a better film throughout if they didn't use all the different devices, with the ghost, because you had to suspend so much disbelief,
Right.
it
Yeah, there was some cleverness to it, like, he'd be talking to like, a kid would call him on the phone, and the kid would be next to him,
would be there, right.
and I thought that
Now,
was kinda clever.
it was, and actually, Mason Thames, who plays Finney, talked about how on set, because that was just a set that they built,
Right.
those actors that were playing the other kids were on the other side of the wall, so he could actually hear them on the phone.
Oh, okay.
Which he said really helped with his
Oh,
performance,
yeah, sure.
you know? But yeah, that's was what another thing that made me feel like this I'm watching a play right
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
the way that it was filmed and
Right, because
choreographed
that's
and
what
stuff.
they would do in a play, and
That's
I've been
right.
in plays where, they drop the curtain, raise the curtain, drop the curtain, and that's to show it's a new day.
Mhm.
Stuff they use devices like that in theater all the time.
Yeah. It's not a long film, it's about an hour and 43 minutes, so, I mean,
Right,
it's a pretty easy watch,
but
and,
for me, once the brother came in and I basically saw the ending, I mean, there was a good half hour left, and I could see it from a mile away, like, it almost ruined the stuff that I liked. You know
yeah.
what I mean? It's like I at the end of it, I'm like, "You know what? There was a lot of good stuff, but the bad stuff kind of overtook it."
Mm. Yeah, the one thing I found interesting, I was watching some of the, behind the scenes, just some interviews with Ethan Hawke and some of the cast. And one of the things he talked about, because not an easy decision to choose to take on a character like this when you're such an established actor,
Mhm.
and now you're going to play a masked guy that murders kids. It's like,
Right,
let me think
right,
about my portfolio for a second before I make that decision. But
right.
because he said, interestingly, he said, it really, when you play a character like that, it can change, at least in his mind, can change the audience's perception of you
Definitely.
going forward, right? And he referenced specifically Jack Nicholson in The Shining.
Here's Johnny.
And he said there's Jack Nicholson, and then there's Jack Nicholson post The Shining. It's
Mhm.
almost like you can't separate the 2 because that left such an indelible
Right.
image and, burn into your brain, that character, Jack. Ultimately, the story was, well written and,
Mhm.
he'd worked with Derrickson before, as I said, and so, um,
I
you
think
know,
you're right, though. I think if you cut that character, you don't really need him, do you? The
Max, his
police,
brother?
yeah, you don't
No,
really need
you
him.
don't, because 'cause you've got his sister is the one solving the
Right.
crime,
And then
basically.
the police are tracking it, so why even
It
use
just
him?
and if they did it, he was too silly. It was too
Right.
silly a character. Like, if it had just been portrayed differently, maybe, but I
Yeah,
think they could have done without it altogether, and it
I
would have
think
been
so too.
fine. It would have
Yeah,
been fine.
think it would have been a
So
better movie.
so where do you land with this? You recommend? You don't recommend? Do you own this film?
No.
You can get it free right now. It's on Prime.
Yeah, that's where I watched it. I didn't see the extras. Where did you get
Oh,
those?
on,
Was it on
just
Prime?
on stream no, on the
Oh,
internet, just on
okay.
YouTube, yeah.
Um, for horror people, they suspend a lot of disbelief. So
Right.
if you,
I
I think
mean, case in point,
right. I think if you like that sort of thing, and you can engage in the first half very easily. Yeah, I think those people will walk away kind of liking it,
yeah.
and I think other people like me, I'm going to be picky of everything. And like I said, the back half of the movie ruined the front half for me. It was like,
Mhm.
oh, I gave you all that credit,
Yeah.
and now I'm taking it back.
Now, a 65, Metascore, what's your take on that?
That's high,
You find that
very
high?
high. Yeah,
Yeah, and
I would come in lower than that.
critics 82%,
Wow,
audience 88%.
wow,
And
both high.
I think it speaks to the strength of, as you keep pointing out, that first 30, 40 minutes.
Yeah, yep.
It's when I'm sorry, but it's when Max comes in, it just kind of
It
it
really goes off
loses
the
something.
rails,
Yeah.
and again, there was some clever techniques used, and, it's hard to take away that from
Did
the
you
movie.
did you recognize Jeremy Davies, who plays the dad? Did you recognize him?
I thought I did, but I'm not sure from what.
I knew I kinda did, but he had such a big, thick beard,
Right, and long hair.
long hair, but he was a character in Lost, a very well-known character in the TV series Lost. He was also in, Saving Private Ryan, which I didn't remember. He played an interpreter for Tom Hanks's character. Again, between him and the kids and this abusive alcoholic father that they were dealing with. So it was like I said before, I don't know if I'd rather stay home or head to that basement and hang out with the grabber. At least you're getting 3 meals a day. You're getting some sleep.
Yeah.
You got the old black phone you can play with.
You could talk to your friends,
Talk to
long
your friend.
deceased.
Yeah, there's something to be said about the grabber's dungeon. I mean,
Yeah.
well, anything else to say about the black
No,
phone?
I think we both hit too many notes of it
Yeah, yeah.
probably, but,
Well, it's,
I think at this point, people who are into the genre have seen it.
oh, right. Yeah, you're talking about spoiler alerts. Well,
Right.
we've got our production assistants that'll take care of that. So
Yeah,
just
he could
putting a
take
lot of good like spoiler alerts, ahead of time
or
here.
drop chunks of it out.
Release this as a series. Yeah, it's a 4-part series.
Yeah, right.
All right. Well, that's gonna do it for another episode of the Old Brother
The
Podcast.
old brother.
I've been your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith, and we will see you next time.
And I'm chilly here in New England. Boo, everyone.